Imagine waking up one morning and discovering that your home now belongs to a different country. Your neighbors haven't moved, your family hasn't moved, the trees, the rivers, the soil beneath your feet, it's all exactly where it was the night before. But overnight, a single line drawn on a map has changed your life forever. How can one line divide millions of people? In this explainer, we are going to uncover the story of how India and Pakistan were divided and how that decision changed the lives of millions forever. We're going to look at the political decisions made behind closed doors, sure, but more importantly, we're going to focus on the profound human consequences of a choice that literally shifted the earth beneath people's feet. Okay, let's dive into Chapter 1, The Peace Before. To really understand how this happened, we need to look at the backdrop of British India. Formal British rule actually began back in 1858, and for decades, people of wildly different backgrounds, cultures, and religions lived side by side under the authority of the British Raj. But as you might expect, resistance slowly began to escalate. The Indian National Congress was formed in 1885 to push for more rights within the system. And then in 1906, the All India Muslim League was founded. Their goal was to represent the interests of India's Muslims, who were starting to fear marginalization in what was a heavily Hindu-majority landscape. Now, the British maintained control through a really complex web of direct governance and strategic alliances with local princes. And sure, colonialism brought things like railways and Western education, but let's be real. Those developments were largely designed to serve imperial interests. They masked some pretty intense economic exploitation and a rigid racial hierarchy. So, over time, the goals of the local movements evolved. It wasn't just about gaining representation anymore. It became a demand for complete and total independence. The end of British rule became inevitable. Chapter 2, The Divide. As the reality of independence got closer, the big question shifted from when will the British leave to what exactly happens when they do. During these high-stakes negotiations, two fundamentally different visions emerged. On one hand, you had the Indian National Congress pushing for complete independence and a unified India. On the other hand, the All India Muslim League, led by Muhammad Ali Jinnah, was growing incredibly skeptical of Hindu-Muslim unity. Jinnah and the League argued that Muslims weren't merely a minority within India, but a distinct and separate nation that required its own homeland. This divide deepened significantly after the 1937 provincial elections. The Indian National Congress won a sweeping victory, which absolutely heightened the Muslim League's fears of being pushed aside in a future Hindu-majority state. Throw World War II into the mix, which left Britain economically drained, politically exhausted, and desperate to leave India, and the pressure cooker was sealed. The British promised eventual independence, but offered almost no clarity on how to actually implement it. Which brings us to Chapter 3, Drawing the Line. The rushed, frankly chaotic process of actualizing this massive political split. In February 1947, Britain announces it will leave India by June 1948. Lord Louis Mountbatten is brought in to oversee the transition. But faced with escalating violence on the ground and stalled negotiations, Mountbatten makes a drastic decision. He dramatically accelerates the timeline. Under his hastily drafted plan, independence is moved all the way up to August 15, 1947. British India will be partitioned into two dominions, a Hindu-majority India and a Muslim-majority Pakistan. To figure out where those borders go, they appoint a British lawyer named Sir Cyril Radcliffe. So the crucial point here is the sheer absurdity of this arrangement. Sir Cyril Radcliffe had never set foot in India before. Never! Yet he was given just over 5 weeks, relying on outdated maps to determine the borders of these new nations. 5 weeks to decide the fate of millions of human beings. And because of this incredibly rushed timeline, the sequence of events was totally bizarre. Pakistan was officially declared independent on August 14th, India on August 15th, but the partition line, the actual border telling people which country they lived in, wasn't announced until 2 days later, on August 17th. As oral historian Anshul Malhotra notes, people were independent before they knew what side of the border they were on. Millions celebrated their freedom, completely unaware that the ground they were standing on was about to be pulled from beneath them. Chapter 4, Human Consequences. What happened next wasn't just some geopolitical shift. It was a human tragedy of unimaginable proportions. 10 to 15 million. That is the estimated number of people who were displaced. Just sit with that number for a second. It remains one of the largest mass migrations in human history. Hindus and Sikhs desperately fled from what became Pakistan to reach India, while Muslims moved in the exact opposite direction. People were forced to leave behind everything they ever knew. They traveled on foot or packed into unbelievably crowded trains, just seeking safety. But safety was incredibly rare. Pure fear and uncertainty erupted into horrific communal violence across Punjab, Bengal, and Delhi. Entire villages were razed to the ground. Women were abducted and forcibly converted. And perhaps the most heartbreaking reality of all, peaceful neighbors, people who had lived side by side for generations, suddenly turned on one another. Entire trains arriving at their destinations were found with their passengers completely massacred. The human cost is just staggering. It's estimated that anywhere between 500,000 and 2 million people died during the violence. The birth of 2 new independent nations came at the cost of countless families torn apart and communities completely erased. Let's move to Chapter 5, The Legacy, and see how this builds into the geopolitical landscape we know today. The initial geography of Pakistan was completely unnatural. It was formed as a nation with 2 distinct parts, West Pakistan and East Pakistan, which were separated by 1,000 miles of Indian territory. This arrangement just couldn't hold. It eventually collapsed in 1971 when East Pakistan seceded after a brutal civil war, resulting in the birth of Bangladesh. India, meanwhile, adopted a secular constitution, but those communal ghosts from 1947 continue to haunt its society and politics to this very day. The geopolitical scars are undeniably persistent. As journalist Nisat Hajeri points out, the border created by partition is now arguably one of the most dangerous places in the world. It has spurred the development of 2 of the world's fastest-growing nuclear arsenals. Narratives around partition are still frequently used to fuel political rhetoric and nationalism. The global stakes of that one rush decision remain incredibly high. But beneath the geopolitics, beneath the nuclear arsenals, this is fundamentally a story about human loss. Partition reduced deeply complex, layered identities to a single religious label. Language, place, and ancient heritage were forcefully subordinated. As Anchal Malhotra so poignantly observes, those who have never lost their home can't truly understand what it feels like to be completely severed from it. Families lost their roots overnight. History isn't only about the past, it's about understanding how yesterday continues to shape today. Some borders are drawn with ink on a piece of paper by men in distant rooms. Others are drawn through families, through childhood memories, and across generations. The partition of India and Pakistan serves as a stark reminder that the lines we draw on maps can leave marks that last far longer than anyone ever imagined. We are left looking at the enduring legacy of 1947. We see the homes lost, the communities shattered, and the geopolitical realities we still navigate today. And it forces us to look at our modern world and ask, can one line on a map change history forever?